Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey, and by Borg Warner. The automotive industry continues to evolve, and so do the opportunities to define it. Borg Warner, one of the world's most admired companies, gets partners where they need to go. Let's do something big together.
All right, time for another show.
How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing pretty. You too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good? Breathing in, breathing out, and okay. Yeah.
Pulse. Whole thing.
Right. So before you stump us, let's let the audience know.
All right.
We've got Henry Liu here. He runs this operation called Mcity, which is like this mobility autonomous vehicle test track at the University of Michigan. We're going to be talking a lot about AVs. I know you're very skeptical about them, and you know that I am like an AV proponent.
That's right.
So this is going to be interesting. And we also have Michael Robinet from S&P Global here that's going to be talking about all kinds of things about the industry.
So I know you introduced both of those guys because you're going to want help on this one.
Can't wait.
Gary always stumps us with a question about something that happened in the industry, usually on this date.
It's always on this date.
Always. Okay.
It would be very easy were it not on this date. This is trouble. Okay, so November 14th, 1914.
Ooh, wow.
A vehicle was introduced by a company that still exists, but a company that is arguably perhaps not long for this world.
Ugh.
So what was the company? And you'd get like, and I know you know all about these old cars. And if you were to identify this car, it would be just flabbergastingly amazing.
Well, 1914, I mean, Europe is in the middle of World War I at this point.
Right.
So I'm guessing car companies are not introducing cars, but is it a car?
It is a car.
Okay.
It is a car.
Because I was going to say 1914, maybe it's the Renault tank came out then, but no.
It's a car.
So I'm guessing it's got to be an American company. Gary's not giving out
Apparently,
clues.
he's not in the world of giving out clues. So,
And it's a company that's still around, but on teetering. Holy moly.
You're going to guess.
it may still very well be Europe. Maybe because that was just before the war had started, I think.
No, August 1914.
Oh, all right.
Guns of
Okay.
August. I know this very
Yeah,
well.
all right.
So
Yeah,
November.
but if you think about it, I mean, when World War I started, it wasn't like the entire Western Europe
No, that's true.
was covered with.
That's true.
But I would ignore I just said that.
Okay.
Okay. Hence, it's European. Not long for this.
That's
world.
one interpretation.
Well, let's see. I mean, yeah, who's teetering on the brink right now?
Well, teetering might be an
okay.
exaggeration.
Wow.
Could it be one of the Jaguar or Land Rover? I'm not serious. They're not teetering, but
No, but they're not selling cars right now. Jaguar is not.
No.
But he said
And it was okay. And it was. I'll give you more clues.
Okay.
It was built in one of the most amazing facilities in all of automotive history.
Well, then it's got to be Highland Park.
either Rouge. Well, no, Rouge was after that.
It was
so,
after that.
yeah.
So Highland Park, actually, Highland Park had started before that.
Well, the factory started before the vehicle. All right.
Okay, I give up.
The audience is getting bored with
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
It was the Dodge Model 30.
Oh.
Okay, that was their first vehicle. And so the amazing thing is the Dodge main plant.
Right.
Yep.
And so this was on 67 acres. It had its own power plant. It had its own medical facility. It had its own fire department. It had its own power generating system. I mean, this had everything. I mean, we think about the Rouge in that context,
Right.
but Dodge Main basically had the same thing. And because this is Autoline After Hours, we'll undoubtedly talk about Tesla several times before the show is over. And so remember that we were very surprised and amazed at how quickly Elon was able to get plants up and running. So this was astonishing, I think, is that they broke ground for the plant in June 1910, and they were producing parts by November
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Now, admittedly, they were making parts,
not full
cars,
cars, right.
And so, they ended up tearing down the plant, and Factory Zero, the former GM Detroit Hamtramck
Yep,
plant,
that's on the footprint.
is on
It's
the
on
part
that
of
footprint.
actually the GM bought more land,
Yep.
even made it bigger. So
Yeah.
it's still sort of with us today.
Yeah. That's was in a very Polish area of Detroit, Hamtramck. And the old Poles used to pronounce it not Dodge, but Dodgka. And that's what they would say. I work a Dodgka Maine.
And actually, it was because of that plant that many Polish immigrants came to that area. And so basically, the Dodge brothers were responsible for that.
Yeah.
And but it's interesting, you think about the Dodge brothers, died in 1920. And Chrysler ended up buying the plant in 1928 from Dodge. But
I often wanted to write a book about the 10 most influential automotive plants, and most of them aren't around with us anymore. But Dodge Maine would be one, Packard would be another. I would say up in Oshawa, Ontario, that whole Autoplex that started in the 20s, in the 30s, that would be another one. I mean, there's a whole slew of them that just really helped build the industry, and even some over in Europe, outside of Paris, where Renault used to build most of their vehicles right on the edge of Paris. There's all kinds of really interesting facilities that unfortunately aren't with us anymore.
So do you see facilities like that being built today, or having been built within the last 10, 20 years?
Well, they used to build facilities up. Used to be like 5-6 stories tall, and they don't do that anymore because it's not very efficient. But I would say most facilities are built in modules. You got 100 or 150,000 unit module. We'll grow that a little bit, maybe a 250,000 module. That's the way that most of the automotive planners think about automotive plants now. So the days of building a 50,000 unit module, you almost don't do that because your paint shop is not efficient. It's all about the paint shop all the time. And that's where most of the planners will tell you.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
It was interesting that they actually did tri-coating you could get a vehicle with 3 colors on it. I mean, just imagine how difficult that would be to paint.
Well, you got to run it through 3 times.
Yeah.
Mask it, run it through, mask it again, run it through. And I don't know how straight the masking was, but it got done. So,
mm-hmm. Well, think about it. I don't want to dwell on this all too long. We want to get into the modern stuff, but they had separate fenders, front and rear, left and right, different things. So you probably didn't have to run the car through the line 3 times. You just said, hey, put red ones on that one, put green ones on the next. And you had your different color matches.
Yep. All right. So one more thing about that plant. So it was interesting to see some of the nameplates that came out of there. Now, there was the Plymouth Volare was built there, and the Plymouth Barracuda was built there. But I'd completely forgotten that there was a Dodge St. Regis.
Yes.
I don't remember that.
Yes. It was a 4-door basically off that Diplomat platform, off that platform. So.
And there was this goes back to 1949 to 1954, so we may not remember this, the Dodge Meadowbrook.
Nope.
No. Wayfarer, custom, deluxe. But it's
names
amazing.
that didn't last very long.
No, they didn't. But so
anyway,
on to AVs.
Yeah, let's go on to autonomous vehicles. And so, Henry, we're seeing slowly but surely more AVs becoming more available in different cities around the country.
Yeah.
Waymo just announced a big expansion. Or I don't know.
It was in LA that they said,
right,
you used to have to be on a list. Now, if
it's
open, it's open.
Yeah.
Right. May Mobility is talking about getting into more cities, including Ann Arbor.
Yeah.
Atlanta.
But what you're saying is, hey, wait a minute. Right now, every one of the 50 states has its own regulations about autonomous vehicles, or no regulations at all. You're saying what the United States needs right now is a national standard. Is that right?
I wouldn't say this is a national standard. I would say this is a national guidance or national framework for autonomous vehicle deployment. I do think we are at the cusp of large-scale autonomous vehicle deployment, because the technology issues are being figured out. And so you can see there are, cities by cities in terms of deployment on these autonomous vehicles. And so autonomous vehicle has been, on the roller coaster in the last like 20 years also, right? So, if you look at it in terms of the given advancement of artificial intelligence, machine learning, I think we are almost there in terms of figuring out exactly what the technology is.
So hold on. When you say what we need is guidance,
Mhm.
what do you mean? What are you looking for?
Yeah. So what I mean by that is I think if you look at from, I would say, two tiers. One is more and more companies are deploying their autonomous vehicles on the street. And we definitely see benefit. But at the same time, we also want to ensure these autonomous vehicles are being deployed safely, does not become public hazard. We want to ensure that. So there's needs some type of testing standard on the basic behavior competency of these vehicles.
So you're talking about essentially a driver's test for AV systems.
For AV systems, because in the US, we've been relying upon self-certification on vehicle safety, right? So essentially, as long as you don't create problems, then you can deploy. However, we do license drivers, because previously what we have been focusing on in the automotive industry is functional safety. As long as you can drive safely, and then we ensure you have active safety and passive safety type of functions. But now we're really adding drivers. This is computerized drivers, a neural network-based drivers into it. But we do not have any guidance or framework to ensure the safety of these drivers, particularly the basic behavior competency.
Okay, but we may not have a de facto rule, but we have a de jure rule in that if I'm Waymo, it is in my best interest not to have my vehicles run people over, right? And
of course.
And when we did have a situation where Cruise had the problem with running and dragging the person, that they ended up getting in big trouble for that. So I don't understand why we need to create an additional framework when the companies that are involved in developing this technology and putting it on the road, it is in their fiduciary interest.
It is in their best interest
to be safe.
Yeah, it is in their best interest. However, we also see from our experience in terms of testing of some of the commercial available vehicles, they do have, I would say, some of the scenarios, they do run into problems, and they are being deployed. So that's why we advocate.
This is why we have regulation.
Yeah. So that's why we advocate for some of the basic behavior competency. For example, we want to make sure all of the vehicle being deployed, they can safely follow other cars. They can safely do the unprotected left turns. They can merge into the freeways or merge into the road, and also sometimes if you often see those type of situation as well, and you're driving on one lane of the road, but the opposing traffic is sort of wandering around maybe, and you want to be able to, in that type of situation, you want to be able to react to it properly. And so in these some basic behavior competence, basic scenarios for for a human driver, we want to make sure the autonomous vehicle also has the capability to handle that.
Can you do this test virtually, or do you think, i.e., test it on a computer? Plug your stack, your AV stack, into a digital twin and test it that way, or do you think that you need to have physical models being tested on a track?
I would say you need both, because majority of the tests should be done in the digital world. I would say 99.99%, but nothing can replace the physical test at the end. You will still need to have some physical test. And so that's why the test track exists, because then we can design these type of scenarios to do this basic behavior competency test.
So this would this be something that NHTSA would administer, or who do you see being the owner of this list?
Yeah. NHTSA, it certainly has the authority to do that, but they can also delegate to third-party testing agencies, testing organizations to do that. So there are third-party testing organizations exist, and they can do some of these too. And so, John, just to sort of respond to your question, I also advocate not only just for basic behavior competency test, in terms of ensuring these are not creating public, hazard, as Gary mentioned. These companies do have they're in their best interest not to create any hazardous situation. On the other side of the story, when Waymos, Cruise, these leading autonomous vehicle companies deploy, and you also see there are, at least from two groups. One is the agencies, the traffic management agencies, for example, when they deployed in San Francisco or Los Angeles, I'm sure the agency also have questions that the DOT, the city DOTs, they also want to know, when these vehicles are deployed on my street, how does that impact my traffic safety? How does that impact my, mobility? Does that create congestion? Things like that. And you also oftentimes also hear from regular consumers, is this really safe? And how we can ensure this is safe. So you also see right now, some of the companies start to work with third-party testing organizations to provide more independent evaluation of the safety, trying to provide these type of independent evaluation to give more confidence to consumers as well as the public agencies. So there's two sides of things.
It's good PR.
I would guess this would be fairly easy to put together, in the sense that I've been hearing about this complaint. We need a standard that everybody can build to.
Yeah.
And but am I right? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about it, and I'm sure there's a lot of ideas of what that kind of test or guidance should be. Is it just a matter of getting the political will to do it, or what are your thoughts?
Well, unfortunately, it's not so easy. I have to say that. It's actually quite difficult. If it's easy to do, I feel that we probably already built some sort of consensus on how to do the test. The problem is really it's not easy. And the main problem is really we rely upon these machine learning models. And machine learning models itself, regardless how you design these things, either you put it into perception function, planning function, or you put it all together, become an end-to-end type of machine learning models. These models does have capability to handle very complex situations, but notoriously, these models oftentimes create problems in these rare, low probability, safety critical situations.
The so-called edge cases.
So-called edge cases, exactly. And then so I actually have a paper early this year, I call it curse of rarity. It's really a curse to these autonomous vehicles, because once you up a bar, a magnitude in terms of your safety, performance, then the cases become rarer. The data collection, the effort, the cost is one magnitude higher. So it's easy now. It's very easy now to get, on average, in terms of these vehicles can navigate through, autonomously. Some of the students can do that now. But if you want to provide a commercial product to be able to really navigate through complex, urban driving situations, It's just very difficult. And I heard many of the different stories. One of the story I heard that when some of the vehicles, this is in San Francisco, being deployed, and they are following another truck. The truck has a tree, a Christmas tree in it. Well, the vehicle is being trained. If you see a tree, you need to stop. But that truck carry that tree. And so when the truck move away, the distance becomes longer. Then the vehicle start to, pulling forward. But then when the truck slow down, then they feel this is a stationary object. I have to stop. And so it's
because it thinks it's seeing a tree, not realizing it's a tree in a truck.
Yeah. So those are the things. It's not. It's you don't see that often, and so that's why you don't get a lot of the data.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also why I think at the beginning, like 2015, if you roll the dial back 10 years back, everybody want to invest in AV because we think the deep learning algorithm will solve everything. We have the algorithm, we have the technology. Now let's just roll it out, engineering development, and then make it into mass production. That's why 10 years ago, many companies, announced that. Then they find out this edge case or corner case situations. This curse-rarity things kick in. They find, I need so much data to handle some of the situations. Well, the even more difficult situation is what we find is that they also have these machine learning models also have the so-called seesaw effect. Okay, I find my model have difficulty to handle one type of cases. Okay, now let's collect more. We got more data on that type of cases. Now the model is trained and they can handle this type of situation now. Well, another problem pops up. And sometimes even those are the problem they can handle before. After you train this, it might become problematic.
It's like whack-a-mole.
Exactly. So that's why the problem is so difficult. It's not so easy, particularly when you up to the safety performance become 99.9999, then it becomes more and more difficult.
Right. But it's very difficult, and there's all these edge cases, and you never know when an edge case is going to show up that no one ever thought of before. Yeah. And yet you started out by saying we're on the verge of seeing widespread AV deployment.
Yep.
So what's your confidence?
Why is that? Yeah. That's because really I'm very optimistic in terms of I would say artificial intelligence advancement. We start really this become sort of in the commercial world, autonomous vehicle attract commercial investment really because of deep learning algorithms, like 2013 and 14 years. And then there's this major development in terms of transformers and that was once one notch in terms of the machine learning algorithm. Now, in the last 2 years particular, the generative AI, the foundation models, and they have the ability to ability to learn, I would say, the driving skills rather than mimic how people drive. And so that's very different.
Ooh, very interesting.
That's very different.
That's
very different. So the deep learning algorithm, the transformers before, they're trying to mimic how people drive. Okay, I see the situation. This is how people drive. Okay, now I'm trying to essentially mimic how people drive. And as you can imagine, most of the cases we see is sort of like discrete cases. You see this, okay, I learned. You see this, I learned. Oh, no, I know both. Sometimes, things happen in the middle. You have not really seen those. So the word itself is certainly continuous, and it's not discrete. So sometimes it's quite difficult to learn to cover all of the situations. And so, but human, you think about our, as a human driver. My son, he's 19 now, but 3 years ago when he learned how to drive, 30 hours in the driving school, right? And then he started to drive on the public road with a parent inside for the first 50 hours. But there's not a lot of training data. Think about that for human drivers. We don't really rely upon that much of training data.
Human drivers would be terrible coming in edge cases.
Well, see, they learn and then they learn and they become, experienced driver. They can handle some of the cases. And so what I think is that we have, first of all, we have the general context. It's not the contextual information. We're not really just rely upon, look at how people drive. We also understand, the situations in terms of this is Halloween situations and there's pedestrians wearing different costumes. And we have this background knowledge. That's number one. Number two is we learn skills. We don't really mimic how my coach teach me, but I learn skills. And the generative AI, the foundational models, I think give us the capability to look at those and to train the model to start to learn the skills. In this case, I also see the possibility to actually reduce the data we need. We may not need that much of data for us to train the model anymore if we can learn the skills. And so there's this technology development, I think, or the advancement, I feel it gave us the capability now. I feel we're really at the, the last.
Very interesting. So I want to run this back to make sure that I understand
Yeah.
it. What you're saying is, instead of teaching AV systems to mimic what other drivers have done, just feed them all kinds of cases, and they know, okay, in this situation, that driver did this. What you're saying is teaching them basic driving skills.
Basic driving skills.
So when they encounter something they never encountered before, they encounter an edge case, they know how to deal with it.
Exactly.
So would it be they are driving in a different way than human drivers do?
Not necessarily.
So it could be that it would say, it'd be more efficient if I were to tailgate this vehicle. I will get an aero advantage from doing that, and plus it reduces the amount of space, therefore there would be less backup. But I mean, when I talked to the guys at Argo AI, they basically said, no, we want to train our AI to drive like human beings do.
Exactly.
Because they're going to be in the world with other human beings.
So you can still, so again, look at in terms of human drivers, when we learn, we're not really mimic in terms of, my coach is teaching me. We're really looking at, okay, we look at the vehicle in front of us. We don't actually exactly know how far we are from that vehicle. Our eyes measures the distance, but the distance is not, it's farther distance. We don't really know is that 50 meters or 55 meters. We don't really know that, right? But we can still drive. We feel, when we get too close, we need to slow down. And then we would, when the front vehicle has, sudden, stops, and then I want to stop quickly as well. So those are the skills we learn. And now with generative AI, I see we have the capability to learn such things as well. We don't have to, with this generative AI, we don't have to measure the distance that accurate. Because again, people don't act.
So what you're saying is, not only do you need less data to teach the system, maybe you don't need all the sensors and everything too, or not as many.
Potentially. Potentially I do see.
So does Tesla have it right, do you think? Can you do it all with video?
Well, that's a question that's being asked every time. Every time people ask me, after I take over Mcity as director, many people ask the same question. I would say, from the first principle point of view, human being, we don't really rely upon LiDAR sensors and, very accurate.
We use our video, our eyes.
Yeah, exactly. So from long-term perspective, I do see there's a pathway. Short-term, I'm skeptical on that.
Yeah. But I mean, isn't the point for an automated system to outperform the human being? Okay, we were talking about manufacturing before,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They came up with numerical control because they could make parts more accurately
Yeah.
than a guy could with a manual jig bore, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm going to have an autonomous vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
I want the autonomous vehicle to be a better driver than
Certainly.
most people. Not better than John, but
Yeah.
better than most
Yeah,
people.
yeah, certainly. That's because if you look at the in terms of accident rate, fatality rate on the road, there's a lot of these is because of the driving under influence, the drugs, the alcohol, and all not attentive to driving, reading cell phones or something like that. With autonomous vehicle, you don't have any of those, right? So if we can master the same driving skill, even just master the same driving skill as human drivers, they obviously have much better driving performance than human drivers already because there's no influence, there's no distraction.
Yeah.
Although we do know that AI hallucinates, so we've got to
Yeah.
be careful there.
Hallucination definitely is a problem.
So they may not take drugs, but
well, see, that's the thing. Hallucination generated a lot of these is because the so-called AGI, the artificial general intelligence, and there's so much data need to be sucked in to learn. Actually, when you use less data, use generative approach, I'm not so sure whether that will still exist. So we can see their pathways to overcome that. And so that's why I do feel, given the last 2 years of I would say artificial intelligence advancement, AI advancement, we are at the verge of, breaking through. So I'm assuming all the leading companies, they must know this already, and that's why they really start to roll out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in this certification, or I guess this, setting up guidelines, but more if I've got a new company and I want to be able to put my vehicle on the road under certain circumstances, maybe you pass a test that gets you to here. And then you've got certification that unless you change the vehicle dramatically, you've got license to put your vehicles on these roads under these circumstances. And maybe you take another test that says, hey, I've been able to hit some of these other edge cases or other capabilities, and then that broadens the capability or the areas that you could function or you operate your vehicle. I mean, to me, that would add some level of assuredness from the public that, oh, that's a level A vehicle, level B vehicle, or however you score it. It would give people some additional comfort that, oh, that vehicle is interesting. I mean, when you go to Phoenix, you see these Waymo vehicles riding around all day.
Yeah.
And, some level of confidence that, oh, that vehicle has been able to pass these particular tests, just like, you and I had to take a driving test, same thing. I feel pretty sure that it can handle most of what's in front of it if it's on the road in front of me.
Yeah, yeah. So Mike, I would separate these two things. One is I feel is more regulatory type of frame, which is we want to guarantee basic behavior. So that's pre-competitive. Everybody should have it if you want to deploy on public road. Then above that, in terms of, are you better than 10 times better, 1 magnitude better, 2 magnitude better, or this situation I can handle, that situation I cannot handle. These we're getting into more competitive space. So those I feel we should offer frameworks in terms of how these should be conducted, but you don't have to regulate anything like that. So that's why I always advocate, we have some basic behavior competency we want to ensure, but the rest of it, we provide some guidance.
So the basic is regulatory?
That's what
And then the rest is frosting on the cake.
It's more in the competitive space.
But I mean, isn't basically the SAE levels do what you're talking about? I mean, so when you see those Waymos rolling around, somebody has said that's a level 4 vehicle. I think that's more
descriptive of the capability, the possible capability of the vehicle, not so much can it do it under all circumstances. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought that level 4 meant it should be able to operate under these criteria given the content that's on the vehicle. But past that, I don't know if there's some sort of test that says, by the way, it's got the content and it passes all these tests and it is, certified or something like that. I don't know if the standard goes quite that far.
So John, Mike, you're right. We are talking about only level 4 vehicles. This is not because these vehicles say pass the basic behavior competency, then they become level 2, and then pass another notch, become level 3. No, it's not. We're talking about only level 4, level 5. These are all level 4, level 5 vehicles. And then for level 2 vehicles, they are driver assistance systems. So you have a driver taking responsibility. Whatever you do, that person take responsibility. We're talking about a vehicle without a driver. So there's no person taking responsibility. So level 3 is sort of in the middle, right? So, but really the focus is level 4.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about how Gen AI has really accelerated this development. And I love what you're saying too, of that we're going to soon see quick deployment of it. But we're going to have to wrap up this segment of the show. But Henry Liu, thanks so much for coming on Autoline After Hours. Very interesting discussion.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to come back, talk about more industry news, and but first a shout out to our sponsors.
Performance that shines, even in the rain. That's what really matters. Bridgestone Potenza tires, improved grip in wet conditions.
The automotive industry continues to evolve, and so do the opportunities to define it. BorgWarner, one of the world's most admired companies, gets its partners where they need to go. Let's do something big, together.
All right, we're back. And but now we're getting into a whole bunch of other things. And Gary, why don't you kick us off?
So, Michael, S&P Global Mobility has been doing a lot of research into the implications of what the Trump presidency will do to transportation. Tell us about that research.
So I would say back in August-ish, we obviously knew the election was coming and we knew we would get a number of questions. The campaign had already been underway. Back then, at least it was Trump and Biden, but nonetheless, we kind of knew what was coming, and we more or less built 4 scenarios of different political outcomes that could impact the industry from a trade perspective, an emissions perspective, how swift autonomous vehicles could be approved, whole number of what would happen to the TIV, total industry volume, what would happen to the PSD, that's an acronym we use, propulsion system design. Is it a PHEV? Is it an E-rev? Is it a BEV? Whatever the case is. So we looked at a number of different situations. We looked at 4. I would say our 2 highest probability was going to be a Democratic split or Republican split. Split being split the House. Basically Congress, or split Congress. House goes one way, Senate goes another way. That didn't work out. So we actually looked at other scenarios, which would be a Republican sweep or a Democratic sweep. Obviously, the Republican sweep worked its way through. And so we're working under that scenario to kind of build some guidelines in terms of how we're going to have to modify our forecast. It really wouldn't have worked for us to kind of guess out loud and say, well, we think it's going to be an X, and our forecast, we more or less forecasted the status quo, because that's a known, at least a known of sorts. And then if there's going to be different, well, obviously we'll have to integrate that in our forecast. And that's really what we're doing right now, is integrating those changes in the forecast. So that kind of talks about what we did in terms of discovering or trying to understand what all the different facets would be. Now it's down to brass tacks. What does it really mean? And we're literally having calls every day, because you learn new things every day, but we're having calls every day about what do we think is going to happen to emissions policy? What's going to happen to the IRA? What's going to happen to Build Back Better? The trade policy is a big deal. I do a lot of work in the supply community. They are getting gray hair thinking about what the trade situation could be, and in the end, USMCA. So there's all these different levers that can get pulled, and which the order that they get pulled and how far they get pulled and who pulls them back is all up for discussion.
So you guys, so you look at tariffs, you look at the California waiver.
Yep.
You look at general emissions regulations across the board, the IRA incentives, that the tax credits, and USMCA, and what's going to happen there. So
You want to tackle one by one?
Well, let's take one. EV subsidies. EV, the $7,500 or lesser, depending on the battery and all that. Done. Killed. What's that do to EV sales?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a couple of different facets if you think about it. Any OEM that really needed that incentive to be competitive, that's obviously going to be a problem.
Didn't they all? I mean, who did not need the incentive to sell
maybe
EVs?
our friend Elon didn't need it for all of his vehicles.
Maybe him, right.
And so there's strategic thinking there that maybe that's kind of strategic in terms of how that might work out. But so let's face it, if the 3750 times 2 goes away, that's going to be problematic. It's going to be problematic for some of the major OEMs that were trying to drive down the road, especially what we call BEVing in the middle. For Mom and Pa Smith in Des Moines, I don't know if there's a Mom and Pa Smith, I'm sure there is. I always point them out in Des Moines. I've never been to Des Moines, but I'm sure they live there, that they own an Equinox right now, or they own an Edge or something. And they, at some point, how do we get them into a BEV? And that 3750 times 2, 7,500, that would have been instrumental of getting them into a BEV. Now the market's going to have to basically build scale enough to bring the cost down to get them into that vehicle, or other factors like maybe, fuel prices go sky high and it drives them into that vehicle because it's more cost effective. All kinds of possibilities.
But yeah, let's talk sales though. So we're on track to do 1.2 million EVs in the U.S. this year.
Right.
It's a little over 8% of the market, 8.6% or something like that. Where's your forecast go now? Do sales drop? Do they stay even? What happens?
No, I think it's a complicated factor because right now there is a regulatory framework, and it's kind of like a bus. You just can't stop it on a dime. That regulatory framework, as we all know, the OEMs are basically committed through 27. They can mix their propulsion system designs. They can do a little bit more of this, a little bit less of this, but they really can't do an awful lot. I mean, they're kind of stuck through 27. Our thought, and again, reality might be different, but our thought is probably by 27, whatever the regs are, they're more or less going to get quote unquote frozen. Mm-hmm. And so, folks, you're on that trajectory. Just keep going. If we take the $7,500 away, that's definitely going to be a problem.
Well, that's it, because the marketplace has a vote.
No. But to your point, then we may bring back the ability to sell credits. I mean, that was going to go away anyways. Well, maybe that gets brought back. So this is kind of whack-a-mole. You talked about whack-a-mole earlier. There's a lot of moving parts here.
Okay, so. But you just can't look at the EVs in isolation.
No.
And it's the other point that you guys looked at in terms of overall environmental regulations. Yeah. So, I mean, we sort of treat it as though this is, chiseled in stone. It's not, right? I mean, these can change like that.
I would say through 26. I mean, well, let's face it. If there's an investment and you're ready to launch something in the middle of 26, there's so much too much risk in not investing because you've got or not deploying because you've got the tooling's done, everybody's ready, suppliers are ready. You kind of have to do it. But that's why we say like sort of that 27-ish. That at that point, basically there's going to be a lot of changes in the portfolio. We call them future product programs, FPPs. What's going to happen to that 2029 BEV that was supposed to launch then? Well, under the old legislation, there's probably a good chance it was going to happen. Under the new one, maybe not so much. So then you either descope it, or you push it, or you literally take it out of the portfolio and do something different. I think this is. I got quoted in the media saying that, every OEM is war rooming right now. They have been for months talking about, okay, if this goes all Republican, what are we going to do? And some OEMs have 4 or 5 plants that have gone to BEV. And as you well know, you can't undo it real quickly. And there's a lot of money involved in doing that. So I think there's a lot of moving parts here. And we're going to find out over the next couple months what's going to happen. By January 20th, we're really going to understand what's going to happen. And I think we're getting indications ahead of time anyways.
Yeah, we are, right. But it's, I think a bit of a sticky wicket if Elon Musk is involved in setting these policies, because there's a definite conflict of interest that he could tell Trump, hey, yank all the subsidies, knowing full well it's going to cripple his competition.
I'm not sure of all the political ramifications, but I would imagine that those subsidies were probably on death row, if they are in death row, maybe before Musk got involved anyways. Because again, I don't speak for the administration by any means, but my thought is they're probably going to want, let's let the market decide what it wants, quote unquote. But I think folks that are listening or watching today, the IRA is a very complex piece of legislation. You've got the consumer part, which is the $7,500 if you buy a BEV. Then there's people don't know a lot about the $45 per kilowatt. If you make a battery plant in the United States and you put it into a module, then we'll get you $45 per kilowatt. And then there's a couple of other facets. We think, and again, who knows what's going to happen, but we think the $45 will probably stick around.
It'll stick around. And I've talked to Washington and people on this, and what they've told me is, look, this is money going to build plants that are doing what? Creating jobs.
Yeah.
What is Trump all about? Creating jobs. And guess what? Where all those battery plants are, almost all of them are in red states.
See, but I don't think that matters. I don't buy this. They're in red states for 1 minute. He doesn't care. He's not going to be elected again. He's already won, right? So what's the blowback? There is none, right? There will be some senators and congressmen who will bitch about it, but if he doesn't want it, he doesn't want it. I mean, and that's what we voted for, right? And so the thing that I really wonder about, though, is in terms of, you work a lot with suppliers, and how does a supplier afford to do this BEV project that may not happen and an ICE project that is more likely to happen?
To your point, I could probably count on one hand the number of suppliers that have enough cash to be able to work on any program they want. So most suppliers have to pick and choose. And they say, okay, well, this BEV program is with one of my favorite customers, or a customer I'm very embedded with. So, if I don't work on it and they really want me to, that's going to be a problem. So there's all kinds of things that go into it. But you are exactly right. I think, what we've been telling suppliers is, you have to look at the program and say, where is it in the chain? Is it on the edges? Is it in a luxury space where maybe they can afford to do a BEV? Is it in the performance space? But it's in the middle of the market. Boy, you had better make sure that vehicle is going to be cost effective, so that it's going to be able to drive volume under all these different circumstances, like the $7,500 going away. And to your point, I don't disagree. $45 to help out on the battery is wonderful. But, to really get that vehicle over the finish line and get people into it, it's another story. I think the other factor is, what about the charge infrastructure? The Build Back Better had money for the charge infrastructure. If that gets pulled back, that's been a major factor why a lot of people might say, I'm not so sure I want to get into that vehicle. I can't drive from here to Grand Haven or whatever, because I don't know if there's a charger at the end. If in fact some of those dollars are pulled back, that's also going to change the mentality of customers in terms of, well, can I actually use this vehicle for what I want to use it for?
Michael, I'm hearing that suppliers are talking about in their terms and conditions, their contracts with the OEMs, that there's a volume guarantee if they're bidding on an EV program.
I've got swampland in Florida for you.
It's not good. It's not good when I hear that laugh.
So that's just a crazy wish on the part of suppliers.
I guess I gotta be careful what I say, but what I would say is that the OEMs will push back pretty hard on that unless they really, really want you in their vehicle in terms of technology or whatever.
If I'm a supplier, I got a fiduciary duty to my, shareholders and everything like that. I'm not going to sign up for a program if I think I'm going to lose my ass on it.
No. Agreed. And suppliers know it's all about risk. How much risk am I willing to bring in on a particular program? So you're going to have volume risk, you've got startup risk. So, we used to, in the ICE world, we used to think about, after about 2 or 3 months, you should be up to pretty well full speed. Yeah, some OEMs kind of proved us wrong and said, well, it took us 6 months, but usually 2 to 3 months. The BEV world has shown us that it takes forever to get up to full speed. And once you're there, someone else is designing, has brought out a BEV, and now they're in your market, and maybe the volume's not there. So all those dynamics are really quite interesting. But to your point, I hate to say this, but the OEMs are, they're a wily bunch. They're smart people, and they're always looking around. Can I find another supplier to do what I can get Joe to do? Maybe I can get Alice to do what Joe does, so that if Joe knows that Alice can do it, then Joe's not going to push me so hard on some of these. And to your point, the number of ICE programs out there that are really what we call cream puffs. You really want to be on them. They get stable volume, good margins, very, very, very stable. There's not as many of those as there used to be. And the OEMs know which ones those are, by the way. So
okay, is it the cream puffs are going away because there are now smarter people who are running the finances at OEMs, or are they going away because the money has been diverted, or the attention has been diverted to BEVs?
It's kind of both. I would say that the OE purchasing or procurement community, they're pretty smart bunch. A lot of them were former suppliers, so they kind of understand how the world works. So you can't get, you're not going to teach them an awful lot. They've kind of seen it all. I would say that, but also as we add more BEVs into the mix, and we're going to be adding more, not as many as we used to, but we are adding more, the volume per platform or per vehicle is going down. And so, but it depends on where you are in the vehicle. If you're in the bottom of the vehicle where you're across more vehicles, then you're good. If you're at the top of the vehicle in the top hat, and maybe the volume's not there, there's some different dynamics that need to be worked in. But suffice to say, as we've moved over to battery electric, a lot of suppliers said, I really want to make sure I've got placement on these high volume ICE programs that we know are going to be kind of one of the last ones to move over, like the F-150s and the T1XX at GM, which is a full-size pickup. And those are kind of the ones that are going to be last to move over. And so suppliers work pretty hard to be on those programs. But once they're on them, they usually work out pretty well.
So to what extent do you see the change in administration changing the focus on propulsion systems within OEMs, which then obviously have a big effect on the supply base?
Sure. No, let's just say that the regs are basically flattened as of, let's say, at the end of 27, someone says, okay, we're flattening them out. And we're, California, there's a lot of discussion what might happen with their waiver. A lot of things have to happen, but let's just say in some way, shape, or form that's going to happen, because I think that is really the administration's the new administration has made no bones about it. That's one thing I think they certainly want to do. If that happens,
they tried the last time,
they tried the last time, but I think they'll probably have a little bit more luck this time. They know what to do and what not to do. So if that happens, I do feel, we were on a trajectory, from a BEV perspective, from a compliance perspective, BEV was going to be a major part of the equation. It's still a part, but I think that they'll probably look at E-revs, basically extended range vehicles, and say, how do we treat those a little differently? So we give them a little bit more credit. Maybe they're more than a PHEV, a plug-in hybrid. So there's a lot of different, but we do think that ICE will stick around a little bit longer. Mild hybrid will stick it around a little bit longer. Full hybrids will stick around a little bit longer, because I think they might change the way that the credit system works and maybe continue what we had before or what we currently have right now. There's a lot of things up. And I think, unfortunately, the OEMs are all sitting there going, well, what do I do? And these are major capital decisions where billions of dollars are, and we've already spent billions of dollars. That's the problem. It's not so much, okay, you told us what to do, and now we're going to deploy all the capital. They've already deployed it, and now they're trying to figure out, what do I do to shut it down? Do I continue it? What do I do? And think of all these ICE engines that we have out there, and that, for lack of a better word, we've more or less stopped development on them, on the majority of the ICE engines. I mean, to me, that's as big an issue as what do you do with the BEVs? Do we redevelop some of these engines? Do I try some new displacements? Do I try some new technologies to continue these along? I think they'll do some of that, but that had been really ramped down.
I think they'll do ICE development for E-revs.
Yeah.
Because as you know, it's a different application. You can do a lot of interesting things with an engine if it just runs in a limited rev range and charges a battery.
Yep.
But what's your thought about E-revs? Because there's so much talk about them all over the world, but especially here in the US right now. And this is, I guess, just more your opinion than anything. Will people actually buy them and plug them in? And I know all the arguments in
yeah.
favor of an E-rev. You don't have range anxiety, you don't have charging time anxiety. You can plug it in, you can run on gas, whatever you want. But will people really buy them?
I'll be honest with you. If they have the opportunity to not have the range anxiety, that would be number one. But number two, the performance you can get out of these vehicles is really superior at many different capabilities. Not all capabilities, but many capabilities better than what you can get out of an ICE vehicle. I think they're going to market that pretty hard. We did a project on this, and the things we learned was just jaw-dropping in terms of the dynamics you got to think about, and what do you do at altitude, because can the engine run enough that if we don't have any power in the battery, it'll be able to propel the vehicle, maybe towing something. So these are all facets that the engineers are thinking about. But I think it's a nice natural evolution to eventually get to a BEV. Once that battery range gets better, the charging time gets faster, it gets lighter. We may not quite be there for all the what we call the different vocations, but E-rev is quite interesting. Right now, it's not graded very well in terms of how the emissions is looked at. They might revise that in the new administration, and that could give that a little bit more breath of life. Mm-hmm. So we know. Let's put it this way: we know that virtually every major OEM is working on E-revs right now. Right. That we know that for a fact. That should be nothing new to anybody out there.
It's not a secret.
That is not a secret. They're all. It's just a matter of when they're going to get there. And the dynamics are very interesting. We talked to a number of people. So you got this engine in the front. The thermal's already done. If you have a V6, you already have in your current vehicle, the thermal program's already done. You already know how to cool and warm that engine. Like you said, you don't get up to 5,000 RPM. You're probably cruising at 750 RPM. You might go up to maybe 2,000 on a good day, but you're working in a range, and therefore you can really optimize how that vehicle works in that range. You probably don't need displacement on demand. So there's a lot of content you can take out of those vehicles.
Take cost out and make the engine more efficient.
I hate to say it, the turbo suppliers probably aren't that happy about E-revs. You probably don't need a turbo in an E-rev. So, there's a lot of content that can be taken out. And all the driveline and NVH gets controlled, because no longer do you have a drive shaft running through the vehicle, or you got a half shafts going to the side. That's coming off the E-motor. You can better control that. So there are some advantages. It's just the problem is not all these BEV platforms were designed to put an engine in the front. And all the crash guys are going, well, now you put an engine in the front, I got to crash the vehicle differently. So it's unfortunately nothing's easy in automotive.
So if you stuck with body on frame, it was a whole lot easier.
Oh, John, you and I have had this discussion forever. Oh my gosh.
So you're saying that there's going to be some of this and some of that and some of the other thing, and the amounts of some are being adjusted.
Yes.
So can you put some metrics on that in terms of, you maybe thought that we're going to be at X in terms of BEVs, and we're going to be at Y in terms of ICE?
Sure. The number a lot of the industry looks at is 2030. Where are we going to be by 2030? They look at that as sort of a pendulum point that, once we get to 2030, the regs have been really pushing BEVs for a good 4, 5, 6 years in earnest. And then where are we going to be by 2030? Europe looks at it that way. Now they look at 2035, 2040, but we still look at 2030 from a North American perspective. I'll be honest. The BEV rate's going to come down, and I think this is. I'll get to your point in a minute, but this is really, really important. And I sit on a couple of supplier boards, so I know this firsthand. It's a different thing if you set up. If I'm on the F-150 and I've got the 5-liter Coyote and I've got the 3.5 EcoBoost, and I can put any one of those engines in. It's a little bit easier to say I'm going to put more Coyotes in versus 3.5 EcoBoost. And that, if you're supplying the seats, you don't care. It's a seat that's a seat, and you don't care. But in the BEV world, and maybe the F-150 is not the best example, but usually it's a different platform. So if somebody says, I'm gonna basically forecast or drive more BEVs, then that's a different program for that supplier versus, let's say, being on the F-150. This is why this BEV situation is so important. And so to your point, given the Trump administration and the fact that it was a sweep, there's no doubt virtually every organization is out there driving their BEV rate down. How far it's going to go down is really up for question. but certainly it's probably going to go south of 30% by 2030. And then at some point, where does it get by 27 or 28? And then what is sort of that natural rate of evolution as new and better product is brought in? And okay, that's cost efficient. Maybe I'll get into that BEV now. I think it's going to be more of a natural evolution and less of using sort of a ball peen hammer to get it into the public. It is what it is, but unfortunately, that's the environment that the supply community has find itself in.
So, I mean, essentially what you're saying is it's up to the car companies to come out with really cool electric cars that people want to buy.
Yes.
That's it.
Very much like, I hate to say it, but very much like Elon did. He brought out cars that were different, had some issues, but they were different, and enough people liked them that they bought them en masse. I think that the OEMs are going to have to do that. They're going to start with longer range PHEVs, then they're going to get into E-revs, and then eventually they're going to say, I've got this BEV, I can get rid of the engine, and this thing does what you want it to do, and it's cost effective.
Yeah. Hey, look, we promised we'd get you out of here at the top of the hour.
We didn't even talk about trade yet. Oh
I know. We didn't.
So,
you're going to have to come back. That's all there is to it. So,
all right.
But Michael Robinet, thanks so much for coming on Autoline After Hours.
Thank
Always
you.
good to have
Thank
you.
you, gentlemen.
Yeah.
All right.
Good. And
Next week, we'll be talking more about autonomous vehicles with the guy from Plus.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So,
that's right.
Pete
Real good.
Lowe from Automotive.
So you'll want to tune in for that one too, folks. And by the way, thanks for having tuned in to this show.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey, and by Borg Warner. The automotive industry continues to evolve, and so do the opportunities to define it. Borg Warner, one of the world's most admired companies, gets partners where they need to go. Let's do something big together.